Welcome to the Dramble video series. In this first video, I'm going to show you how to build a cluster of Raspberry Pi computers, and throughout the series I'll show you how to deploy software to it and eventually run a web server on it. The first step that you'll have to do in building your own cluster is to get some Raspberry Pis and all the other parts. So I have in front of me some of the basic parts that I use to build my cluster. I used these acrylic base plates that kind of stack together using different parts. And you can see I've already put together a bunch of them. You basically take these little spacers and you put them one on top of the other in between these sheets, and you build your Pis up. So I'm going to build this last one really quickly and put the Raspberry Pi in it. First I'm going to take a micro SD card. I also bought a bunch of these, one for each Raspberry Pi, and put it into the Raspberry Pi's micro SD card slot. Other than that, I also put, since I'm using Raspberry Pi Model 3s, this little heatsink on the CPU. That'll help it keep a little bit cooler. So you need to put it in the right place and put in these little screws. I have this little cheap screwdriver I got from Micro Center, but any screwdriver should suffice as long as it can grab these screws. So I'm going to put 4 screws in. You'll have to pardon my hand, I have a little paint on it from a project I was just working on. So you put in all 4 screws, one in each corner. Don't want to get them too snug, just a tiny bit snug because you're not trying to break anything here. You're just holding in a Raspberry Pi. And then I also have these LED boards. There's instructions for how to make these on pidramble.com. You can operate the Dramble using the software I use without having these in place, but it helps you to indicate activity, like when a server's getting a request or something like that. So I put these in starting on the 3rd pin, and it plugs in and it controls this RGB LED. So the next step is you put it on top of the other Pis, and then you put 4 spacers in. And then for the top, you just put on another one, and then you put these top little screws in. You can actually build this as high as you want, but for cost reasons, I limited myself to 5 Raspberry Pis. You'll note that these little spacers are actually standard computer parts that you can get for electronics or computing work. I actually have a box of them right here. These are 2mm spacers, but you can get any kind of size that you need. The Raspberry Pi uses 2.5mm spacers. And you can build things like this, which is even smaller. This is a Pi 0 cluster. Same amount of Raspberry Pis, but they're all a lot slower because they have a chip that only has 1 CPU core. But this is basically the same thing in principle. It's just I'm using the Pis themselves instead of these acrylic spacers that hold the Pis. So once we have all that together, we have the basic part of the entire computer together. The next thing that we need to do is have networking so that they can all talk to each other. And for that, I just use a standard 8-port gigabit Ethernet switch. This one is a TrendNet. I think I got it for something like $30 on Amazon, but you can get whatever kind of switch that you want. The nice thing I like about this one is it fits perfectly alongside the Raspberry Pi stack, and I made these little jumper cables that are about 5 or 6 inches long, and I labeled them so that it's easier for me to take things down and put them back up. So once you get this together, you can just plug in all the network jacks, and if you want to connect the Pis to the internet, you can connect your home network or your other network that's connected to the internet to one of these, and all the Pis can talk to your local network. At this point, you have networked Pis, but there's no power for them. One thing that I'm going to be doing for this Pi, and I'll probably make a video on it at some point, is putting a power rail in that connects to the GPIOs using a 5-volt power supply. But for now, we're going to use micro USB, which is these little ports over here. And to do that, you can use a standard USB multi-port power charger. This one I think was $20 or $30 on Amazon, and you can find them almost anywhere. The main thing is you want to get a good one that will last and not flake out on you. The Raspberry Pi needs a decent amount of power, so you want to have at least two or more amps per port. So for this, I bought these little micro USB adapter cables in this unit, and I labeled them as well, so I know to put the first one on the bottom, second one above it, and so on and so forth. And at this point, I have a fully functional Raspberry Pi Dramble cluster with 5 Raspberry Pis with power and networking. Once I plug it in, it'll boot up, and then the next video will show you how to network them together and get them initialized.